Now, do you think you could handle something as simple as changing a light bulb?
No sweat.
Before they were movie stars, they were on sitcoms you've totally forgotten. Tom Hanks in a dress? Jim Carrey working at a cartoon studio? We're diving deep into the bizarre first jobs of Hollywood legends, and you'll be shocked by the shows that gave them their start. 1. Bosom Buddies.
Don't make me take you down, guy.
You can't take me down.
I'm bigger than you are.
Yeah, make your move, big guy.
You first.
Before he was an Oscar-winning movie star beloved by the entire world, Tom Hanks was the star of a goofy sitcom called Bosom Buddies. And here's the crazy part, he spent half of every episode in a dress. The show, which started in 1980, was about two young guys working in advertising, Kip and Henry, played by Tom Hanks and Peter Scolari. They are looking for a place to live in New York City, but they can't find anything they can afford. Then they find the perfect apartment. It's cheap, it's beautiful, but there's one catch. It's in a building for women only. So what do? They invent two female alter egos, Buffy and Hildegard, and move in. The comedy came from them trying to live their double lives, switching back and forth between being men and women to keep their secret from their landlord and their female neighbors, one of whom was played by the amazing Donna Dixon. It was a silly premise, but the show was actually brilliant in its own way. The real reason it worked was the amazing chemistry between Hanks and Scolari. You could tell they were having a blast, and their ad-libs and jokes were often the best part of the show. It was genuinely funny and had a lot of heart. Despite its charm and the obvious talent of its leads, it never got great ratings and was canceled after only 2 seasons. It's mostly forgotten today, except as a fun piece of trivia about how one of the biggest movie stars in the world got his start in a show that was much smarter and funnier than its goofy premise suggested. Tom Hanks proved he was a star in a goofy show, but what about a show that was so brilliantly smart with its humor that most people just didn't get the joke? 2. Sledgehammer.
Hammer, don't you read the papers?
No, I prefer to get my information from more reliable sources like rumor and small children.
Trust me, I know what I'm doing. That was the catchphrase of Inspector Sledgehammer, the main character of the brilliant 80s sitcom Sledgehammer. This show was a perfect parody of all the violent, over-the-top cop movies and TV shows of the time, like Dirty Harry. Sledge, played by David Rash, was a detective who was completely obsessed with his giant handgun, which he named Sue. He was incredibly destructive, often causing way more problems than he solved. He believed that the answer to every problem was to shoot it. A lot. For example, in the very first episode, he tries to stop a bad guy on a rooftop by firing a bazooka at the entire building. The show was full of this kind of slapstick, ridiculous humor. His partner was a smart, capable female detective named Dory Duro, who was always trying to keep him from destroying the city. The show was clever, funny, and totally unique. The problem was, maybe it was too clever. A lot of viewers didn't get the joke. They thought it was just a stupidly violent show, not a satire of stupidly violent shows. The ratings were never great, and it was canceled after just 2 seasons. In fact, the writers were so sure they were going to be canceled after season 1 that they ended the season with Sledge accidentally causing a nuclear explosion that wiped out the entire city. When the show was surprisingly renewed, season 2 started with a title card that read, 5 years earlier. It was that kind of smart, self-aware comedy that has made it a massive cult classic today. A show that makes fun of tough guys is brilliant. But what about a show that featured a main character who was not just tough, but a certified teen genius who was smarter than all the adults around him? 3. It's Your Move.
I was very straight with your mother. I didn't tell her I was Shakespeare. I just said I was a writer.
You're not a writer. You're a failure.
Before he was the star of shows like Arrested Development and Ozark, Jason Bateman was a teenage actor. And in 1984, he starred in a sitcom called It's Your Move that was so sharp and funny, it's a crime that it's been forgotten. Bateman played Matthew Burton, a teenage scam artist who was basically a genius at tricking people. He lived with his older sister and his mom, and the main plot of the show was his constant battle of wits with his mom's new boyfriend, Norman. Norman was a writer who could see right through all of Matthew's schemes, and he was determined to expose him. The show was incredibly clever and brilliantly written. Matthew would come up with these elaborate plans, like creating a fake rock band to win a contest, or getting out of a test by faking a series of bizarre events. It was like a teenage version of Mission Impossible, with a sharp, sarcastic edge. Jason Bateman was perfect in the role, playing Matthew with a charming, sly personality that made you root for him, even when he was doing bad things. Critics absolutely loved the show for its smart writing and great performances. But the network didn't seem to know what to do with it. Its dark humor and morally questionable hero made some executives nervous. It was on at a tough time slot, and they didn't promote it very well. After just 18 brilliant episodes, it was gone, leaving it as a true hidden gem that ended way too soon. A show about a scheming teen was a bold move, but our next sitcom was about a group of kids who were the total opposite. They weren't scheming, they were just trying to survive high school, and their show became a brilliant classic for anyone who ever felt like they didn't fit in. 4. Square Pegs.
We shouldn't overestimate our audience. To be truly popular, you have to communicate with the masses.
Okay, how about Joni loves Chachi?
One size does not fit all. That was the theme song of the 1982 sitcom Square Pegs, and it perfectly described this brilliant show. It was all about two best friends, Patty and Lauren, who are freshmen in high school. All they want is to be popular and fit in with the cool kids, but they are hopelessly nerdy. Patty wears big glasses and Lauren wears braces. They are smart, funny, and totally out of place. The show followed their desperate and hilarious attempts to climb the social ladder, which always ended in failure. What made this show so special and so brilliant was how real it felt. It was created by a former writer for Saturday Night Live, Ann Beats, and it had a quirky, smart sense of humor that was very different from other sitcoms at the time. It was one of the first shows to really capture what it felt like to be an awkward teenager, with all the anxiety and embarrassment that comes with it. The cast was amazing, including a very young Sarah Jessica Parker as Patty, who showed the early signs of the star she would become. The show also featured incredible new wave music from bands like the Waitresses, who did the theme song, and even had guest appearances from bands like Devo. Critics and a small but loyal group of fans adored the show. So why was it forgotten? It only lasted for one single season. There were rumors of problems on the set, and the network decided not to bring it back, leaving it as a perfect one-season time capsule of early 80s high school coolness. Feeling like an outsider in high school is one thing. But what about a show that bravely tackled the feeling of being an outsider in your own small town, dealing with some of the biggest social issues of the day? 5. Carter Country.
I want to know everything that went on. I mean, any unusual noises. I mean anything. If a tomcat got lucky that night, I want to know about it.
In the late 1970s, America was changing, and TV was trying to keep up. One of the shows that brilliantly tried to tackle the big issues of the day with humor was Carter Country. The show was set in a small town in Georgia, not far from where President Jimmy Carter was from. The story was about a small-town police department. The police chief, played by Victor French, was a traditional old-school Southern white man. His whole world gets turned upside down when he has to hire a new deputy, Sergeant Curtis Baker, who is a black man from the big city of New York. The comedy came from the clash of cultures between the laid-back, rural South and the fast-paced, modern North. But more importantly, it dealt directly with issues of prejudice and how the people in the town, both black and white, had to learn to get along. For its time, it was a pretty bold and brilliant idea for a sitcom. It tried to make people laugh while also making them think, and it did so with a lot of heart. And here's a piece of trivia for you. One of the writers on the show was a young, up-and-coming comedian named Andy Kaufman, who would soon become famous for his own bizarre style of comedy. Carter Country was a moderate hit and lasted for 2 seasons before it was canceled. It remains a forgotten but important attempt to find humor and common ground in a changing America. A show that tackled tough topics was rare for its time. But what about a show with a classic fairy tale premise, a poor girl meeting a rich guy, that started as a brilliant hit but disappeared almost overnight? 6. Angie.
Hi, Angie.
Hi.
I'm sorry I'm late.
Are you late? I didn't even notice the time.
In 1979, a sitcom called Angie premiered, and it looked like it was going to be the next big thing. It was part of a powerful programming block on ABC, airing right after the monster hit show Mork and Mindy. The story was a classic Cinderella tale. Angie Falco, played by Donna Pesco, was a working-class waitress in a coffee shop in Philadelphia. One day, a handsome, wealthy doctor named Brad Benson walks in, and they fall madly in love. They get married very quickly, and the show is all about Angie adjusting to her new life of wealth and high society, while her down-to-earth Italian-American family clashes with Brad's stuffy, rich family. For its first season, the show was a smash hit. The ratings were huge, and everyone was talking about it. The chemistry between the leads was fantastic, and the show was genuinely charming and funny. It had all the makings of a show that would be around for years. But then, the network made a fatal mistake. For the second season, they changed the show's time slot, moving it away from its popular lead-in show. Suddenly, nobody could find it. The ratings plummeted instantly. The show that was once in the top 5 was now one of the lowest-rated shows on TV. The network panicked and canceled it midway through its second season. It was one of the fastest and most dramatic rises and falls in sitcom history. A brilliant little show that went from a huge success to a forgotten failure in the blink of an eye. A show that burned bright and faded fast is a common story. Our next show was also a popular feel-good sitcom that is now sadly overshadowed by a heartbreaking tragedy that happened to its young star. 7. My Sister Sam.
Brandon asked you out on a date? Yeah. Sam, that's hysterical. It is?
In 1986, My Sister Sam was a solid hit sitcom. The show starred Pam Dauber, who was already famous from Mork and Mindy, as Samantha Sam Russell. Sam was a successful 29-year-old photographer living a quiet, organized life in San Francisco. Her world is turned completely upside down when her 16-year-old sister, Patty, played by the bright and talented Rebecca Shea Fair, shows up on her doorstep needing a place to live. The show was a classic odd couple comedy. Sam was mature and responsible, while Patty was bubbly, impulsive, and a bit wild. Their relationship was the heart of the show as they learned to live together and become a family. The show was charming, funny, and brilliantly cast. The chemistry between Dauber and Schaefer was believable and heartfelt, making it a favorite with audiences. It ran for 2 successful seasons and was a staple of the CBS Monday night lineup. The show ended in 1988, but its upbeat and happy memory would be forever changed by a horrific real-life event. In 1989, a year after the show was canceled, the young actress Rebecca Shea Fair was the victim of a terrible crime when a stalker took her life. This awful tragedy sent shockwaves through Hollywood and led to new laws to protect people from stalking. Because of this sad history, the light-hearted sitcom is often remembered today not for its jokes or its brilliance, but for the tragic loss of its wonderful young star. It's tough when real life casts a dark shadow over a fictional story. Our next show, however, gave a future comedy superstar his very first starring role, even if the show itself was a bit too tame for his wild talent. 8. The Duck Factory.
What did I do? You and Marty got nominated for the Annie Awards. You got 2 nominations.
Oh, no wonder Aggie's so upset.
Long before he was Ace Ventura, The Mask, or The Grinch, Jim Carrey was a young, unknown Canadian comedian trying to make it in Hollywood. In 1984, he landed his first leading role on a sitcom called The Duck Factory. The show was set behind the scenes at a small animation studio that produced a cartoon called The Dippy Duck Show. Carrey played a young, innocent cartoonist named Skip Tarkenton, who moves to Hollywood and gets a job at the low-budget studio. He is full of bright ideas and optimism, which clashes with the weird and cynical veteran cartoonists he works with. The show was supposed to be a workplace comedy, kind of like The Office, but for animators. It was a brilliant opportunity for Jim Carrey to show off his early comedic genius. You could see flashes of the incredible physical comedy and rubber-faced expressions that would later make him a household name. He was clearly a star in the making. However, the show itself was pretty tame. The network seemed to want a standard, safe sitcom, not the chaotic energy that Carrey would later become famous for. The show didn't get good ratings and was quickly canceled after one season. It's now a forgotten footnote in comedy history, but it's brilliant to go back and watch, just to see a glimpse of a comedy legend before he became a global phenomenon. Seeing a future legend in a forgotten role is always a treat. Our next sitcom was also ahead of its time, featuring a positive and inspiring story about a young man breaking barriers, but it sadly just couldn't find an audience. 9. He's the Mayor.
City had a need and he heard the call, so he ran for the job in the city hall. There were lots of people who were putting him down, but he showed some style and he took the crown.
In 1986, the sitcom He's the Mayor tried to tell a new and brilliant kind of story. It starred a respected actor named Kevin Hooks as a young, idealistic man named Carl Burke. After being a community organizer, the 25-year-old Carl decides to run for mayor of his city as a joke, never expecting to win. But to everyone's surprise, he does. Suddenly, this young man with no political experience is in charge of a major city. The show was about his attempts to learn on the job and bring positive change to his community, often clashing with the older, more cynical city council members. The show was created to be an inspiring and positive comedy. It had a great star and a hopeful message about a young black man succeeding in politics. For the 1980s, this was a pioneering role and a premise that was way ahead of its time. Unfortunately, the show just didn't connect with viewers. The humor was very gentle, and some critics found it to be a little too preachy and not funny enough to be a sitcom. The ratings were very low, and the network canceled it after just 13 episodes. It's a forgotten show, but it deserves to be remembered as a noble and brilliant experiment that tried to bring a different kind of hero to the sitcom world, even if it didn't last long. A show about an idealistic young mayor was a great idea. Our next show was also about young idealists, but this time they were lawyers, and the cast was packed with so many future stars, it's unbelievable the show is forgotten. 10. The Associates.
We are deeply offended by the fact that supposedly sophisticated men like you could so readily accept the fact that a gay person would come in here talking like Sylvester the Cat.
Imagine a workplace sitcom created by James L. Brooks, the genius behind The Mary Tyler Moore Show and Taxi. Now imagine it stars a young Martin Short in his first major role. That sounds like a guaranteed hit, right? Well, in 1979, that show existed, and it was called The Associates. The show was a brilliant and witty comedy about a group of young, naive lawyers starting their careers at a stuffy, old-fashioned Wall Street law firm. The humor came from their struggles to fit into the corporate world without losing their souls. The writing was incredibly sharp, smart, and satirical, exactly what you would expect from James L. Brooks. Martin Short was hilarious as the most neurotic of the young lawyers. And get this, the show also featured early roles for future stars like Ted Danson and Allie Mills. With all that talent, the show should have been a massive success. But it wasn't. It aired on Saturday nights, a tough time slot, and its sophisticated humor just didn't catch on with a wide audience. Critics loved it, and it was even nominated for 2 Emmy Awards. Despite the critical acclaim and the brilliant cast, the show was canceled after just 1 season. It remains one of the greatest what-if stories in sitcom history. A show full of future stars that was too smart for its time is a tragedy. But what about a show that was not only smart, but also incredibly dark, centered around a main character who was a complete and total jerk? 11. Buffalo Bill.
I'm going to have a baby.
Well, this woman obviously doesn't speak English.
I speak perfect English. I'm going to have a baby right now.
Right now?
Yes.
In the 80s, most sitcom heroes were lovable and kind. Then came Bill Bittinger. Buffalo Bill, which premiered in 1983, was a dark comedy starring the incredible Dabney Coleman as an arrogant, selfish, and completely egotistical local talk show host in Buffalo, New York. His character, Bill, was not a good person. He was rude to his staff, especially his smart producer JoJo, played by Joanna Cassidy. He was mean to his guests, and he only cared about himself. And that's what made the show so brilliantly different. It was a sitcom that dared to have an unlikable main character. The humor was biting, sarcastic, and often uncomfortable as it satirized the world of television and the nature of fame. It was the kind of complex, anti-hero-driven comedy that would become popular decades later with shows like Curb Your Enthusiasm. For its time, it was revolutionary. The show was a critical darling, earning an amazing 11 Emmy nominations during its 2-season run. But audiences in the 80s just weren't ready for a sitcom lead who was such a jerk. The ratings were low, and the show was canceled, leaving behind a legacy as a brilliant, daring comedy that was simply too far ahead of its time. A dark comedy about a talk show host was a strange idea. But our next forgotten sitcom was set in an even stranger place, a 24-hour convenience store, and it was filled with some of the most bizarre characters you've ever seen. 12. Open All Night.
All right. Do you remember me? I was in here the other day and you gave me the directions.
Oh, yeah, the guy with the suit.
Yeah. I had to come back here and thank you. Those were wonderful directions.
Long before shows like Clerks made convenience stores a setting for comedy, there was a quirky, brilliant, and almost completely forgotten sitcom from 1981 called Open All Night. The show was about a man named Gordon Feaster who, after having a midlife crisis, quits his boring desk job and buys a 24-hour Store 364 grocery mart. The show followed his nightly adventures dealing with the parade of weirdos, oddballs, and strange characters that would wander into his store in the middle of the night. The show had a wonderfully weird and offbeat sense of humor. Gordon's family, including his wife and stepson, would often be there, adding to the chaos. The supporting cast of regular customers and employees were all delightfully eccentric. It was a show that found humor in the small, strange corners of everyday life. The problem was, its low-key, character-driven style was very different from the loud, joke-heavy sitcoms that were popular at the time. It never found a large audience and was sadly canceled after only 13 episodes. It's a true cult gem, a brilliantly unique show that offered a funny and sometimes sweet look at the strange things that can happen when the rest of the world is asleep. A 24-hour convenience store is a unique setting. But what about a sitcom set during World War II, focusing on a group of women trying to make their way in a world turned upside down by global conflict? 13. Good Time Girls.
Oh, are you engaged to Leo? No. Betty is. He never did get my name straight.
The 1940s and World War II might not seem like the most obvious setting for a lighthearted sitcom, but in 1980, a show called Good Time Girls gave it a brilliant shot. The series was set in Washington, D.C. during the war and followed the lives of 4 very different young women who share a small apartment. With all the men away fighting, they have come to the city to work and contribute to the war effort. The cast featured some fantastic actresses, including Annie Potts, who would later become a big star in Ghostbusters and Designing Women, and Lorna Patterson. The show was a fascinating blend of comedy and history. The main stories were about the women's friendships, their jobs, and their romantic lives, but it was all set against the backdrop of wartime rationing, air raid drills, and the constant worry about loved ones overseas. It was brilliant because it tried to do something different, showing a unique time in American history from a female perspective. It was funny, charming, and had a lot of heart. Unfortunately, it aired at the same time as the incredibly popular show The Dukes of Hazzard and got crushed in the ratings. It was canceled after just 13 episodes, becoming a forgotten but wonderful experiment in historical comedy. A sitcom set in wartime was a risky idea, but our next show took an even bigger risk, telling the story of a gritty, realistic, and often troubled family, and it featured a future Jedi Knight in one of his very first roles. 14. The Texas Wheelers.
School, you're wounded, you're a hero. You're a wounded hero.
In the mid-70s, most family sitcoms were about happy, smiling families who solved all their problems in 22 minutes. The Texas Wheelers was not one of those shows. This brilliant and gritty show, which aired in 1974, was more of a dramedy than a sitcom. It was about the Wheeler family, living a tough life in rural Texas. The father, Zach, played by the legendary character actor Jack Elam, was lazy, irresponsible, and often disappeared for long stretches, leaving his 4 kids to fend for themselves. The show was a surprisingly realistic look at a family struggling with poverty and dysfunction. It found humor in dark situations, but never shied away from the drama of the family's life. And here's the most amazing part. The oldest son, who was trying his best to hold the family together, was played by a very young, unknown actor named Mark Hamill. Just a few years before, he would pick up a lightsaber and become Luke Skywalker. Critics praised the show for its honest writing and incredible performances, especially from Elam and Hamill. But its realistic and often downbeat tone was just too much for audiences looking for cheerful escapism. It was canceled after only 8 episodes were aired, but it stands today as a forgotten and brilliant piece of television realism. A show about a struggling family was a tough sell. But our next show, from the same legendary producer, was even more controversial, taking place in a rundown hotel filled with society's forgotten people. 15. Hot L Baltimore.
No. I mean, I loved Hot L Baltimore. Was a noble effort. I mean, not a noble effort. It was a terrific show.
The name Norman Lear is television royalty. He's the man who created groundbreaking shows like All in the Family and The Jeffersons. In 1975, he produced one of his most daring, brilliant, and controversial shows, Hot L Baltimore. The title itself was a joke. The E in the hotel's sign had burned out. The show was set in the lobby of a seedy, run-down hotel and focused on the lives of its eccentric and down-on-their-luck residents. This included a pair of elderly women, a cynical young man, and most controversially for the time, 2 ladies of the evening. Like all of Norman Lear's shows, it used humor to tackle serious social issues. It talked about poverty, loneliness, and people living on the fringes of society. It was also one of the first American shows to feature a loving older couple who were not married. The cast was a brilliant ensemble of character actors, including a young James Cromwell. The show was praised by critics for its boldness and its humanity. But it was just too much for 1975. Many local TV stations refused to air it because of its mature themes. The controversy scared the network, and despite Lear's powerful reputation, the show was canceled after just 13 episodes. It remains a brilliant but forgotten example of a producer pushing television's boundaries as far as they could go. Some future stars got their start on controversial shows, but our next show featured 2 future comedy legends who teamed up for a pure slapstick comedy that showcased their raw, chaotic energy before they were famous. 16. Working Stiffs.
On a desk here, all right? Complain.
You know, we're not going to keep this job if you keep complaining, you know that?
Imagine seeing Michael Keaton and Jim Belushi, two of the biggest comedy stars of the 80s and 90s, when they were just young, hungry guys starting out. In 1979, you could have on a short-lived sitcom called Working Stiffs. The show was about two brothers, Mike and Ernie, who work as janitors in a big office building in Chicago. They are constantly dreaming of bigger and better things and always trying to come up with get-rich-quick schemes, which, of course, always go terribly wrong. The show was a brilliant showcase for its two young stars. It was a throwback to old-school slapstick comedy, like The Three Stooges or Laurel and Hardy. Keaton and Belushi had incredible chemistry and a manic physical energy that was hilarious to watch. They were constantly falling down, breaking things, and getting into absurd situations. The writing wasn't always the strongest, but the raw comedic talent of the two leads was undeniable. You could just tell these guys were going to be huge stars. Unfortunately, the show was put on the air with very little promotion and was up against some very popular shows. It was canceled after only 6 episodes were shown. It's a true forgotten gem, a brilliant but brief glimpse of two comedy giants at the very beginning of their incredible careers. A show about two janitors was a simple premise. Our next show was also about a family, but it tried to capture the warm, loving chaos of a big Italian-American family, a concept that proved surprisingly difficult to get right. 17. The Montefuscos.
He doesn't drink that much. He doesn't gamble that much. He doesn't run around with Ma. He doesn't.
Frank, at his age, he hardly runs around with me.
In 1975, the creative team behind the massive hit show, The Jeffersons, tried to create another family sitcom. This one centered on a loud, loving, multi-generational Italian-American family living in Connecticut. The show was called The Montefuscos. The story revolved around the patriarch, Tony Montefusco, a painter and decorator, his wife, and their 3 grown sons, all of whom lived nearby and were constantly gathering at the parents' house for the traditional Sunday dinner. The show was all about the family's interactions, their arguments, their traditions, and their love for one another. On paper, it sounded like a can't-miss idea. The goal was to create a warm, funny, and relatable portrait of family life. It had a talented cast of veteran actors, including Joseph Cirola and Naomi Stevens. The show was meant to be brilliant in its simplicity and its focus on heartfelt family dynamics. But something just didn't click. Critics found the show to be too stereotypical and the humor to be too broad. It felt like it was trying too hard to be a classic family sitcom without bringing anything new to the table. Audiences seemed to agree. The show had some of the worst ratings of the year and was canceled after only 3 episodes aired. It became a forgotten attempt to capture the magic of a big, loving family on screen.